certain beliefs have led to some very shocking persecution, amputations, deaths, etc., etc. What is the reality?
So, I think it's worth noting first and foremost that this situation with witchcraft, harmful practices, persecutions, killings, kidnappings, mutilations, has started to be described around 2007. Did it exist before? Probably. To what extent? I don't know exactly. And so it started being documented, and clearly this is probably the biggest component that contributed to convincing the United Nations to create the mandate on the human rights of persons with albinism in 2015. It's a global mandate, but I think the first motivation, the driving element in the decision to create that mandate were those most extreme violations of human rights. So thanks to that mandate, a lot of cases were documented. Not only thanks to that mandate, there are a few NGOs that have done tremendous work.
Such as
Under the Same Sun, first and foremost, who really documented and is still documenting those attacks, killings, mutilations, kidnappings. But then the UN mandate also helped very much collect the information and publicize this situation. So what I know is mostly based on on the information that they are providing. The information comes from the organizations that are also operating on the ground. So it's an entire ecosystem that is contributing to documenting the situation. For many years, Tanzania was identified as being the country where the highest number of attacks have occurred. Today, we know we have about 800 attacks documented since 2007 in most of the African countries and a few countries outside of Africa, but it's mostly Africa. Mostly sub-Saharan Africa. Attacks documented. An attack that's not documented is not an attack that we're aware of. So there could very well be attacks elsewhere, in, I don't know, Latin America, Asia, who knows, Europe maybe. I feel safe as a person with albinism in Europe. I'm not aware of any attacks, and I doubt there's anything comparable to what we're talking about right now. Perhaps in the past, perhaps decades ago, perhaps centuries ago, people with red hair centuries ago were killed because they were different. But it's no longer a reality, thankfully, in our countries. But back to those killings in people with albinism, they're still happening. They're still happening today. They might not be happening anymore, or to the same extent in Tanzania. Sorry, It seems that this is shifting to other countries: Malawi, Zambia, DRC, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Madagascar. More recently, we've worked together with the UN expert to document attacks that were reported in Madagascar. So it's not over at all. It continues, and this has to stop.
Horrific.
This is horrific.
It's truly horrific. And of course, advocacy, within that, raising awareness, plays a large part. As difficult as it is to speak about it. I mean, the images we've put up on the screen now, but you're talking about young children. You're talking about babies who are being attacked and mutilated because there is a belief system that their blood, that their organs, that their body parts hold some sort of special power within rituals, within products, within medicine, and
so it's indeed it's very much fueled by a lack of education in the general population. Clearly, it's also interesting to note that it's slightly more complicated. That there's a huge money component in this, in everything that's happening around those attacks. Witch doctors, to make it very concrete, make money by selling body parts, potions, to whoever is able to pay. And most of the time in those countries where those attacks occur, we're talking about politicians. So what's been repeated over and over in the albinism community is that if you live in those countries where attacks are a reality, during election times, you need to hide if you want to stay safe. Because a politician running for the elections would pay a witch doctor in order to win the elections. So it's I said it's very much tied to a lack of education, but you would think that someone running for the elections is not part of that group of the population,
of that criminal group,
with the least with the lowest level of education. Yet they're ready to pay. They're ready to believe that the body parts and potions made out of people with albinism body can bring good luck. It's crazy, but it's a reality. The other thing that is worth mentioning, and you've already mentioned it, is that awareness is key. If you don't make it public, if you don't report on what's happening, then people and governments, first and foremost, could act as if nothing's happening. Not in my country. There's no report, so it's not happening. Well, we know that it's happening. So we need to make some noise, and we need to continue as long as it's happening. We need to raise awareness, and we need to educate people so that they understand that people with albinism are normal human beings. They're not ghosts. They don't have superpowers. They just have a genetic condition that makes them look slightly different. Full stop. But it's fighting the lack of education is extremely challenging, and I have to be very honest here. The Global Albinism Alliance is very ambitious, wants to, and has set itself big goals. I'm convinced that we can achieve a lot, but we're not going to solve the issue of lack of education in the general population around the world. This is something that governments, this is something that international institutions, the United Nations, have to deal with. That's their job. We have limited resources, limited capacity, no matter what. I trust that we will get more resources as time goes on, as we prove the world, as we prove potential funders that we can do great work, such as with the WHO list of essential medicines. So we'll do more soon, but there's a limit to what we can do. So it's also a message to governments. It's within your responsibility to address those issues. We're talking about the most fundamental human rights. To live in security without fear to be attacked. We going to bed without thinking that perhaps I'm going to be kidnapped overnight. For parents not to worry about leaving their children alone for a few minutes at home. This is a fundamental human right.
And we're recording this in Lyon, obviously, home to the headquarters of the international police organization Interpol. And has there been, has the GAA done work, outreach work to law enforcement, to the international organizations involved in law enforcement? Is that something
Not the
that's been
GA.
part of the strategy?
Not the GA, but other players in the albinism community have done so and are still doing so. There's a lot of work that is driven by the UN expert on albinism, the current expert, Mulukan Michi Drummond. She's from Zambia, and she's done a lot around that, together with the Africa Albinism Network, which is a regional albinism organization in sub-Saharan Africa. They've been actively working around that because it's clearly an issue. We have so many cases of attacks where we know who the criminals are, and there's no or very little prosecutions. If people can freely attack a person with albinism without fear of being arrested and put into jail, of course it continues. So that's a very important point that you're making here. We, as we grow and as we gain more capacity and resources, we will look into what role we can play in that field, together with our partners. It's always a matter of teamwork and bringing to the table whatever skill set we've got, expertise. But a lot has to be done in that area as well.
And you've spoken a lot about data, and in prior conversations, you've been very careful. I wonder, how much onus you put on the need for accurate data from the field, and then also how do you see AI helping the GAA in its work going forward?
Very good point. And actually, that makes me think of a question that, surprisingly, you haven't asked yet. You could have asked it after the first minute of this conversation. What is the prevalence of albinism? How many people with albinism are around the world? It's a tough question. Yet it's a very important point, because in any of our activities, and particularly when we conduct some advocacy activities, data is key. And the first question that we are asked by whoever we're talking to, governments, the UN, is how many people do you represent and are affected around the world? So if you look into the literature for decades, the figure that that was used, talking about the world prevalence of albinism, was 1 person out of 17,000. And as I got more and more familiar with the albinism scientific literature, since 2010 I've been reading so many papers, I came to wonder where that figure actually came from. And eventually, by doing the job that researchers should have done, I've come to the conclusion that it's not reliable. It's been mistakenly repeated, cited over and over. Interestingly, that figure comes from a study that was conducted in the 60s in North Carolina in schools for the blind. And there, so they had a population of children with albinism. Half were of European ancestors, and the other half were Afro-Americans. And they combined the two prevalences of those two groups and came up with 1 out of 17,000, which was only the prevalence of albinism in that population. So school children in visually impaired schools in North Carolina in the 60s. Soon it became the prevalence for the entire country, for the albinism population. And who knows why? A researcher who was not very professional turned that figure into the world prevalence of albinism. interestingly. So thankfully, there was a paper that was published, I believe last year or a couple of years ago, that made things very clear. This figure, 1 out of 17,000, should no longer be used. It's obsolete. It's not correct. And among the many other facts that are stated in this article, you will read that there is no such a thing as the world prevalence of albinism because it varies from one region to the other, from one country to the other. There are regions of the world where the prevalence is higher, regions where it's lower. And there are many countries for which we don't have numbers at all. Starting with my own country, France. What's the prevalence? There's no study. There's no statistics. We don't know. So based on a few studies run here and there in Europe, in Africa, and interestingly, actually, the most accurate recent studies were conducted in sub-Saharan Africa, African countries. In countries where, thanks to some very effective advocacy conducted by albinism organizations, we managed to have a question about albinism added to the national censuses in those countries. So we have very accurate data for those few countries. But basically, what we know today is that in the lack of more comprehensive studies, in a European country, there's an estimate of one person with albinism in 12 to 15,000 people. In a sub-Saharan African country where there was no particular study conducted, that prevalence ranges between 1 in 4 and 1 in 7,000 people. And that's all I know. There are many countries where we have no idea what the situation is. That's for the prevalence of albinism. But the same applies to many other things that has to do with albinism. We talked at length about skin cancer. I have no paper to rely on if you ask me what the prevalence of skin cancer in people with albinism is. There's one paper that says that in sub-Saharan Africa, if you're a person with albinism, you're 1,000 times more prone to developing skin cancer. But it's a very rough estimate. What's the mean age? We don't know. We have some, I could give my expert opinion on those many points, but it's unfortunately not based on comprehensive, recent, and professionally done research studies. So a challenge for us in our advocacy.
Mm. And with wind now in your sails, after the WHO success announcement, you are now going to be hosting in partnership with ILDS and
Standing Voice,
the first ever World Forum on Skin Cancer Prevention in Cape Town in South Africa for persons with albinism.
Correct.
So this is exciting. This is the first of its kind. You're partnering principally, I think, with the dermatological world, with support from the Pierre Fabre Foundation. Tell us what it means to be going into this conference. First of all, to hosting this conference, co-hosting this conference, but to be going into it on the back of the success from the WHO announcement and the partnerships more general. I believe these are long-lasting partnerships, but it really requires that collaborative approach in order to achieve results.
Absolutely, and on that very point, it's clearly one of the lessons learned this past few years. Whether you're small or big, but particularly if you're small, you need to partner with others if you want to do big things. So that's what we've been trying to do, and that's what we will continue to do. It's always better to partner with others if you want to do big things. So what does that mean for me to be co-hosting this event? First and foremost, it means that we're doing our job. we are fulfilling our mission. We're doing what the community is expecting us to do, which is to raise awareness at the global level, which is to be movers, to be shakers at the global level, to go here and there and find partners that can support our community and that can help us address our needs better. That's for me the first component in that project. Then of course it means for me it means hope. Skin cancer is the first cause of death in our community, particularly in the tropics, in the low and middle income countries. People die of skin cancer at the age of 20, at the age of 30, 40. We even have cases, regularly we have cases of children developing skin cancer.
Very young, yeah.
Even though it is preventable. So we have NGOs doing enormous work in order to address this issue here and there. But it's always limited to country, it's always limited to a small area, which means that there are many people in our community that are left alone, that are not provided with any education, that are not provided with any means of sun protection, that don't have access to any dermatologist, to any skin cancer screening. So back to those NGOs, they're doing great work. They've developed some very strong experience, and they have best practices to share. But it's serving only a limited number of people. So my hope with this World Forum and what will come next is that we'll manage to finally address this issue globally and to respond to the needs of our entire community, wherever people live. The main goal of this forum is to develop and implement a global action plan to end skin cancer in persons with albinism. So a lot of prevention, a lot of management, because as I said before, I'm sure you remember, if you were exposed to the sun, then you will have to deal with the consequences 20 years later. So even if we gave access to photoprotection to all people with albinism living around the world today, those in their 20s, in their 30s that have been exposed to the sun, they will develop skin cancer for sure. So we need to give them access to screening and give them access to treatments so that we can save their lives.
And finally, I think from my side, funding and your dreams for the alliance going forward. But how much is it going to take, I should say, to really make an impact in the field? And can you tell us a bit more about the sort of funding model that you're relying on, and potentially, reaching out to those that might be in a position to fund projects, to fund working groups, to help fund the Albinism Alliance? What does that sort of funding strategy look like?
I'm sure you won't be surprised if I tell you that funding is an issue. It's been an issue. It is an issue today. And that's also one of the goals of this World Forum for our skin cancer program, to find more funders. We've got the solutions. We have a community that is not that large. We did not mention the term rare. Albinism is a rare condition. So it's feasible, it's realistic, yet it requires a bit more money. So hopefully this World Forum will open the eyes of potential funders so that they understand that by supporting us, they will make it possible for people with albinism no longer to no longer develop skin cancer and no longer die from skin cancer. So far, we've been mostly operating thanks to donations of individuals. And I think that we will continue relying for a part on donations. We have a community who is united, made of people who are ready to step up and act for their rights, including for those who have the means to contribute financially. So I think it's going to continue to be part of our funding strategy. But clearly we need to shift towards foundations, to shift towards grants. That's, I think, the only way for us to really achieve our big goals. Until now, we've been discussing with pharma companies, particularly sunscreen manufacturers, the idea of supporting our projects. We haven't been successful yet, but I cannot imagine not being successful, meaning that I cannot imagine that sunscreen manufacturers would not support what we're trying to do, because if their mission, their genuine mission, is to prevent people from developing sun-induced lesions, cancers, then our missions are crossing, and they should therefore be supporting us. We'll see what happens, but it would be very disappointing if we did not receive their support. We need also support for our other projects, programs, those on vision. It's a different type of support, meaning a different type of activities. When it comes to improving vision in people with albinism, it's a lot of education of ophthalmologists, and it's also about research projects. Research needs money, and we need money to help research. With in that field, so it really has to do with our second pillar, the second pillar of our mission, improving knowledge, improving research. We've mostly been running a biannual conference, International Scientific Conference on Albinism. Today, there's no solution to give a perfect vision to people with albinism. You can give prescription glasses, it's not going to fix the problem. You meant to ask me, but I wear contact lenses, so I don't have a perfect vision at all, even with my contact lenses on. But there's hope that in the future we'll be able to provide people with albinism with better solutions to improve their vision. We're not talking about fixing albinism. We're talking about offering to people the possibility to have a better vision. It will be up to them to decide what they want to use. I see today that when you offer glasses to people, generally, they tend to wear them. I know you have difficulties with your daughter, but it's not long term, I'm sure. So we've been organizing that conference. Why? Because without us organizing that scientific conference on albinism, researchers, medical professionals would have not organized it. It is a fact. We were hoping that by organizing the first conference, that would be enough and they would take over. It's been years and they're still not taking over, and they're happy that we're organizing it. So that means that it's probably within our role to organize it, but it has a cost. So we need support for that. And what's important to point out is that it's not just, when it comes particularly to biomedical research, biomedical research on albinism is not just on albinism. When you conduct a research study on a specific topic, you never know what you're going to get to. You never know what you're going to discover. Meaning that what you will discover might very well be in line with what you're looking for, meaning that it will contribute to address an issue that you're working on, but it could also very well contribute to another issue that you're not specifically working on. What I mean is that they are bridges between conditions. Albinism is a rare condition, and as such, it's suffering from like many other rare conditions, lack of funding. There's more funding going into conditions that are not rare than into conditions that are rare. That's a reality. But I could very well see research on albinism contributing to solving other visual issues that are not rare at all. The reduced visual acuity in albinism is mostly related to the retina that is not fully developed in people with albinism. So the retina is the back part of your eye, the sensor that transforms visible light into information for your brain. There's another condition where the retina, the central part of the retina, the same part that's affected in albinism, there's another condition where that central part degenerates. It's called age-related macular degeneration. It's a very common condition in the general population. I wouldn't be surprised if research on albinism, focusing on the visual part of albinism, could contribute to finding solutions for that other condition, and perhaps vice versa. So that's just a message to funders. Don't adjust the cursor of the money that you give just depending upon how many people are affected. Because, again, you don't know what those research projects will lead to, and also because it's just not fair. We'll always remain the last served in that world. So yes, we also need funding from there, and there are very good reasons to support us.
And I think also I should add that under your leadership, you've embraced social media, and you can follow the work of the Global Albinism Alliance on pretty much all platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. What else?
X.
And so I urge everybody to go and to give them a follow, comment, ask questions, send in data, and then finally, Antoine, just in terms of your leadership and your team's successes, it's been really impressive, and I wish you all the best for the upcoming conference. And the work going into 2026, and many, many, many more successes to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. It was a pleasure. Thank you.